بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على أنبياء الله جميعا وعلى سيدهم وخاتمهم حبيب إله العالمين أبي القاسم المصطفى محمد اللهم صل على محمد وعلى محمد وعلى أهل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين الذين أذهب الله عنهم الرجس وطهرهم تطهيرا اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. يا أيها الذين آمنوا إذا جاءكم فاسق بنبأ فتبينوا أن تصيبوا قوما بجهالة فتصبحوا على ما فعلتم نادمين. صدق الله العلي العظيم. For so many decades and centuries, the followers, the advocates, the supporters of Bani Umayyah claim that the Shia of Imam Hussain, they invited him, they insisted on him to go to them to lead the revolt, and ultimately when he responded to them, they betrayed him, they let him down, they turned against him, and it was the Shia who murdered Imam Hussain. This has been said by many historians. Ibn al-Arabi is one of them. Ibn Taymiyyah is another one. Many historians, they bring this claim and these allegations and accusations. Even contemporary ones are repeating this cliche. They say it's the Shia who murdered Hussein, and now they sit during the season of Ashura and they weep for him. They regret what they did. This is why this self-flagellation, when they beat their chest, because they feel the pain. They were the one who murdered him. Now they try to ease this pressure, psychological pressure. They try to get pardoned and forgiven. But this is not right. These allegations are baseless. It is Bani Umayyah and their regime, the one who is responsible for the martyrdom of Imam Hussain alayhi salam. But because Bani Umayyah, they failed in their mission. The tragedy of Ashura represented a huge scandal for them, huge embarrassment for them. So rather than accepting the responsibility and admitting to their faults, to their crimes, they try to cover up. They try to shift the attention away from them. God says in the Quran, sometimes a criminal, when he does something bad and people face him, rather than apologizing, he or she would insist that he's right. وَإِذَا قِيلَ لَهُ اتَّقِ اللَّهَ أَخَذَتْهُ الْعِزَّةُ بِالْإِثْمِ. When it is said to the criminal, reverence God, fear God, and admit of the wrongdoing you committed, vain glory is going to seize him. أَخَذَتْهُ الْعِزَّةُ بِالْإِثْمِ. Vain glory seizes him sinfully. This is the example of Bani Umayyah. They don't admit, they don't accept this reality and this truth. They want to shift the attention, so they blame the followers of Ahlul Bayt. And unfortunately, they teach their kids today. Sometimes I meet people who are educated in good schools, good universities, but when they go through this discussion of Ashura and who's responsible for it, because they learned that, they heard that from their fathers in their homes and their families. They just accepted without thinking. They blame the Shia for this tragedy. They say Shias are responsible. They invited Imam Hussain, they betrayed him, ultimately they murdered him, and now they sit and they cry for him. They keep repeating this out of ignorance. But, my friends, and definitely you're going to see someone saying this. You're going to read it in a book. You're going to read it in an article. You're going to read about these accusations. What is the answer? The answer, when you come to the objective answer, to the neutral answer, you will find that the tragedy of Ashura, the murder of Imam Hussain, was premeditated and pre-planned by Bani Umayyah. From a long time. From a long time. It was planned by Muawiyah bin Abi Sufyan. He's the mastermind of this tragedy, and he inspired his son Yazid to execute this. He kept telling him, Muawiyah, before his death, he kept telling his son Yazid that after me you will be the caliph and you will find some resistance. Some leaders in Medina are not going to accept you. If they don't accept you, then use force with them. Use violence with them. Bani Umayyah have a long history of enmity and hostility and jealousy against Ahlul Bayt. The story is not new. The story goes back to many decades before the day of Ashura. Many decades. It was Bani Umayyah who planned for that. Now, some historians today, they say, but those were the people of Kufa, and the people of Kufa are Shia. This is not right. Part of Kufa was Shia, following Ahlul Bayt. The other part were enemies of Ahlul Bayt. Do you know that in Kufa, even during the time of Imam Ali, there were some Kharijites who were against him, who ultimately murdered him. They lived in Kufa. Do you know that in Kufa, there were some avowed enemies of Ahlul Bayt living in Kufa? Do you know that some people moved from Syria, from Sham, who were the supporters and followers of Bani Umayyah? They traveled all the way and they lived in Kufa. So Kufa was not entirely a Shia-dominated city. Kufa was a cosmopolitan city. Many communities, many tendencies, many people lived in that. Some of them were supporters of Ahlul Bayt, others were enemies. And those who came to kill Imam Hussain on the day of Ashura, some of them, not all of them, some of them were from Kufa, the others were from Syria, from Sham. People who followed Muawiyah. People who supported the regime of Bani Umayyah. Historians say after the murder of Imam Hussain, those who crushed him, there were some people who crushed the body of Imam Hussain after his murder at the request of Umar ibn Sa'd, the commander of the army. Those people who crushed him, none of them was from Kufa. All of them came from Sham. Supporters of Bani Umayyah. So it's a lie. It's fabrication when they say the Shia murdered Imam Hussain. It wasn't the Shia. The Shia leaders in Kufa, yes, they invited Imam Hussain. And they tried everything possible to go and support him. Many of them were detained and imprisoned. Many of them. Others were persecuted and killed. Like Hani ibn Urwa, one of the greatest companions of the Prophet ﷺ. And one of the leaders, main leaders of the Shia community. the followers of Ahlul Bayt in the city of Kufa. He was killed before the day of Ashura. And others, they tried to make it to Karbala. They were detained. They could not go. And those who made it ultimately were killed in Ashura, on the day of Ashura. Like Habib ibn Mudahir, he was from Kufa. Muslim ibn Awsaja, and many other great leaders. Those were the leaders, Shia leaders. They did not betray Imam Hussain. Maybe there were some soldiers, but they were not leaders. Some soldiers, yes. Some soldiers, in the beginning, maybe they were on the side of Imam Hussain. Then out of fear and intimidation and persecution by Bani Umayyah, they backed up. They left. Maybe there were some of them, ordinary soldiers, but we cannot say those were main Shia personalities or leaders. None of them was. And at every time, you can find some people who are obsessed with the dunya. طُلَّابُ الدُّنْيَا النَّاسُ عَبِيدُ الدُّنْيا. Imam Hussain himself says, people are mostly people who are without faith, without trust in God, are slaves to this dunya. عَبِيدُ الدُّنْيا وَالدِّينُ لَعْقٌ عَلَى أَلْسِنَتِهِمْ. Faith is not strong in their hearts. They play with faith. If faith works for them, they follow it. If one day faith does not serve their own narrow interests, they turn against faith. They turn against their imams. So there were some. But to put the blame squarely on the Shia and you say that they were the people who invited Imam Hussain, they turned against him and they are responsible for his murder, this is sheer lie and fabrication. The story started many decades before. The planning for Ashura by Bani Umayyah for this tragedy started many years before. It was not new. It was a process in the making. Now, why those writers and historians, despite knowing about the crimes of Bani Umayyah, not just against Imam Hussain, against the humanity, against the entire ummah, still they defend them, they praise them. One of those leaders, I don't mention his name, he says he lives in one of the Gulf states. He's not from the Gulf states, but he lives in one of the Gulf states. He says, Banu Umayyah mazlumun, they have been wronged by the Shia. The Shias, they fabricate against them. But Bani Umayyah, Umayyah dynasty, Umayyah caliphs, this is a great nation, great leaders. Those are leaders, pioneers of Islam. Look at what they did, Futuhat, the conquest. I said the first night here in my Arabic speech that most of these conquests were not for God, were not to help the nations, but to exploit the nations. If you read history carefully, if you analyze the history of Islam, you realize that Bani Umayyah, when they sent their armies, their troops to occupy other lands, it was not for the Islamic expansion, the expansion of Islamic morality. It was for the expansion of their authority and their power and their dominance. The proof, you ask me for the proof? Southern Spain was an Islamic community hundreds of years ago during Bani Umayyah. Southern Spain, Andalusia. Go today to Spain. Try to search for Islam in that area. Can you find Islam? I've been to that area many times. Southern Spain. 800 years Islam was there. 800 years, 8 centuries. Where is Islam today? Why? Because that type of Islam that ruled 800 years was fake, was not genuine. Was Islam based on imperialism and dictatorship and corruption and exploitation. Not the Islam that came to help and protect people and bring dignity. This is why Islam crumbled and disappeared. If Islam is genuine, it would stay. It will stay there. Now in China, there are Muslims who are suffering from persecution for many centuries, but they are proud of their Islam. Their Islam does not disappear because their Islam is genuine. Even if the government is against Islam, if people love Islam, nobody can take it away from them. But in Spain, the Umayyad Islam was not a true Islam. This is why people were not attached to that Islam. As soon as they got out, everything is finished. There is no trace of Islam today. That was the Umayyad Islam that they presented. And this Sheikh, he says, Sheikh that some of you know him, and I don't want to mention his name, and he's going to be responsible before God for his fabrications, for his manipulations. He says, Bani Umayyah were a great nation. They took Islam east and west. I don't like Islam, even if Islam brings all 7 billion people into its faith. If that is based on dictatorship and coercion, I don't like it. I'd rather people stay Hindu and Buddhist and Christians and others. Yes, when you bring people based on rationality, on love, conviction, this is a good Islam. But if you force them to accept Islam, this is not good. This is not good. Because this is what God says in the Quran. لا إكراه في الدين. لا إكراه في الدين قد تبين الرشد من الغي. Who told you to force people to accept Islam? God did not force them. The Prophet did not force them. So they know what Bani Umayyah did. But you know why they are covering up? Do you know why some writers and historians today and speakers, they defend Muawiyah and Yazid? It's not for the sake of Muawiyah and Yazid. It's not. It is to shield others who were higher than Muawiyah and Yazid, to shield them from criticism. There is a great Sunni scholar, Al-Hafiz, Al-Imam Al-Hafiz Sa'duddin Al-Taftazani. He has a book, Sharh al-Maqasid, book of theology in Imama and Khilafah. Sunni scholar. He says many, and this is not something new, this is many 100 years ago, not something new. He says many Imams and historians, Muslim historians, they know that Yazid was a wicked person, but still they say, no, don't say anything about him. He's Amir al-Mu'mineen, he's the commander of the faithfuls. Then he says, this Imam, he says they know he was wicked. They are not trying to protect himself because they know he deserves even more than la'an, more than cursing. They are doing that to shield others from criticism. Because today if you criticize Yazid, tomorrow you do this with Muawiyah, and then you're going to go higher and higher to others and others and others. So they shield them. They tell you right away, from the base, they tell you don't say anything about anyone. Not that because they don't know Yazid is wicked. They know he's wicked. But they want to shield others, protect others. تحاشيا للأعلى. This is exactly what he says in his book. تحاشيا للأعلى فالأعلى. To avoid criticizing those who were higher and higher than Yazid and Muawiyah, and you know who were they. No need to explain. They were not honest. Imam al-Sadiq alayhi salatu wassalam says the history goes back to 50 years ago. إنا وآل أبي سفيان أهل بيتين تعادينا في الله. We come from the same neighborhood with Bani Umayyah. We lived in the same neighborhood. But what divided us is God. We loved God. قلنا صدق الله وقالوا كذب الله. We said God is saying the truth. Bani Umayyah always insisted that God is lying. فحارب أبو سفيان رسول الله. Therefore Abu Sufyan, their grandfather and mastermind, he stood against the Prophet. وحارب معاوية عليا. And Muawiyah stood against Imam Ali. وقتل يزيد الحسين عليه السلام وسيقاتل السفياني القائم عليه السلام. It will continue. Yazid murdered Imam Hussein, but the story did not end. At the end of the time, Sufyani, who also is related to Bani Umayyah, is going to murder the last Imam, Al-Imam Al-Mahdi alayhi salatu wassalam. And he will fight against him. The story is continuing. The story of this struggle does not end. Why it doesn't end? Because I said a few nights ago, we have a free choice in this life. Some people are programmed. They programmed themselves. It didn't happen against their will. It's not that God programmed them against their will. They chose to be on the side of the truth. Others, they chose to be on the side of falsehood. The story started with the beginning of the creation of the universe. People were divided. Imagine there were 4 people at that time. Adam, Eve, Cain, and Abel. Only 4. Still, 2 of them were fighting each other. Cain was fighting Abel until he murdered him out of jealousy. قال لأقتلنك قال إنما يتقبل الله من المتقين. And the story continued. It went through the day of Ashura, and it will continue, and it would reach till the day of judgment. This struggle is continuing. You have to choose. Ask yourself during these nights, where should I join? Which camp should I stand with? This camp or that camp? The camp of the Prophet and Imam Ali and Imam Hussain and Ibrahim and Musa and Isa and Adam and Habil, Abel, or the other camp of Qabil, Cain and Pharaoh and Nimrud and all the tyrants and Muawiyah and Yazid. Which camp? You have to decide. Every single day there is a situation, dramatic situation, every single day in your life. And everywhere where there is confrontation between justice and injustice, between truth and falsehood, every single day. It happens inside your house, it happens in your neighborhood, it happens in your town, in your city, in your country, in your community, every single day. There is a confrontation. You have to take a side. You have to take a side. You have to decide, who should I stand with? Should I stand with justice and truth and fairness and piety? Or should I stand with dunya and popularity and arrogance and sometimes majority? Sometimes majority. Imam Ali says sometimes majority is tempting. Though it is falsehood, but it is tempting, because some people say, but look at their number. Their number far exceeds our number, so they must be right. They must be right because the number is bigger. The other day I had some discussion with some Muslim friends. One of them said, hey, Imam, the best proof that we are right and you are wrong is that we are majority and you are minority. I said, with all due respect, you haven't read the Quran. If you read the Quran and open your eyes and your heart, you will find that every time God speaks about majority and minority, he criticizes majority and he praises minority. This argument goes against you, so don't repeat this elsewhere. I'm going to forgive you now and keep it secret, which I didn't today. I disclosed that. So don't repeat it. God says, وَلَوْ تُطِعْ أَكْثَرَ مَنْ فِي الْأَرْضِ يُضِلُّوكَ عَنْ سَبِيلِ اللَّهِ. He says to the Prophet, if you follow the desire of the majority of people of earth, they're going to misguide you from the course of God. It's not about majority. Tell me, which prophet had majority on his side? Noah had majority? Noah, God says, handful of people believed in him. Or Abraham, or even Moses, or even Jesus, or even Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. It's not about majority, or it's not about numbers. Numbers do not count. Yes, if numbers are about the truth, they are good. But if numbers are about falsehood and dunya, they are not right. So it was not the Shia who murdered Imam Hussain. It's not the Shia. It was the enemies of Ahlul Bayt. But because it was a big embarrassment for them today, they come today, and then rather than admitting and saying we are sorry, rather than doing that, vain glory, God says, vain glory seizes them. أخذته العزة بالإثم. Rather than admitting and saying, I'm sorry, I have to go back to God, I have to speak the truth, vain glory overseizes him sinfully. فحسبه جهنم ولبئس المهاد. فحسبه جهنم ولبئس المهاد من سورة البقرة. السلام على الحسين وعلى علي بن الحسين وعلى أولاد الحسين وعلى أصحاب الحسين جميعا ورحمة الله وبركاته، وصلى الله وسلم على سيدنا محمد وأهل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين.